Now, for quite a while, actually ever since 2017, we have been waiting for another Super Mario Odyssey title. Now, sure, Nintendo hasn't said anything about a sequel being in the works, but we can always dream, right? And so today we will once again talk about certain things that I want to see in an Odyssey sequel. And instead of looking at the bosses and older enemies, those videos are in the upper right corner by the way, we will look at new enemies that I would want to see in a sequel. And don't worry, the enemies in this video will be brand new. Now, let's dive right in. Number 5. Now, in the first Super Mario Odyssey title, there's one type of enemy that we didn't see at all, even though you would expect it. I'm talking about the Koopa Troopa. Those weren't seen in the game anywhere really. Sure, we saw Hammer Bros, but that's about it. So personally, I would love to see some sort of Koopa Troopa in the next Super Mario Odyssey title. Now, normally Koopa Troopas are creatures with removable shells that come in many different colors. And usually they walk back and forth with some looking out for obstacles, and others just ignore them. In general, they aren't too special. At best, they will run at you as soon as they see you, but that's the most they will do. However, if Nintendo put them in Super Mario Odyssey, there's one very interesting thing they could do with them. They could create a new type that has a spiky shell instead of a normal one, and also has a new, very special power, being able to spin around in their shell. And we've seen this before in a game like Bowser's Fury. In this title, players have the ability to climb inside of abandoned shells, allowing them to spin around, making this a very speedy form of transportation that can also be used to defeat other enemies nearby. But there is a time limit to it, because you will get dizzy at some point. However, the Koopa Troopas themselves can't do this at all. And so I think it would be cool if there was a spiked shell version that attacks you by spinning at you. And when you capture him, you're able to use this ability as well. And Nintendo could easily build puzzles, challenges, and boss fights around this. Aside from that, it would also make this Koopa Troopa enemy a lot more fun to fight. The normal ones aren't that exciting after all, so something like this would certainly be cool and fun. Number 4. Now, one thing that I would love to see in a sequel is a type of enemy that we have sort of seen before. Not completely, of course, but the idea has been seen before in other games like Super Mario Galaxy, but not in Super Mario Odyssey. An enemy based on one of the races seen in the first Odyssey title. We haven't seen that before, and it could be really cool. Just imagine a new type of Boo enemy that's based on the Bonitors, for example. However, Nintendo shouldn't give them the ability to capture you, because that would just be too powerful. But still, they could give them the power to possess different objects and attack you with them, like a hat, brick block, or something else, turning them into some sort of possessed object. Now, another thing they could do with such a concept is create an enemy based around the Shiverans. You know, that race of chubby seal-like creatures that can roll and bounce around like a maniac? Now, those would also be really fun to fight. Sure, they seem harmless, but they could always create a new, evil-looking type that makes you feel, less guilty about attacking them? And of course, their strategy would be quite simple, bouncing around and bumping into you. And it would actually be best if they didn't do any damage at all. They are in the game just to annoy you, or even push you into a pit or some other form of danger. In a way, it would be a more interesting take on the bullies, this time being a lot faster and more mobile. And it would also be really fun if you could push them back as well by long jumping into them, for example. In a way, they're a bit like a bouncy ball. Something like this would be so much fun to mess around with. And if you could also capture them, you could also use their bouncy ball ability in more different locations. Number 3. Now, in the world of Super Mario Odyssey, we go to a lot of different locations that were quite interesting. You know, stuff like deserts with pyramids, a place that looked like Antarctica, and way more. However, for our next enemy, we will look at one that would fit with one world seen in the game, the Lost Kingdom. This place is located southeast of the Cloud Kingdom and southwest of the Metro Kingdom, and it seems to be based off a warm, humid rainforest or tropical island, with a prehistoric vibe. And here here we see a lot of weird creatures, and even a new type of dinosaur that looks a lot like a Yoshi, the Glidon. This is a creature similar to a flying lizard who is enthusiastic about gliding and flying, and you can capture him and use him for exactly that. However, what I would like to see in the next Odyssey title is a new type of Yoshi that is made for either combat or running fast. Something like that would be really cool, and it would also expand upon the Yoshi scene in the Super Mario universe. In older titles like Super Mario World, we saw a ton of dinosaurs after all, and also a lot of different types. And I would love to see some new wacky dinosaurs in the series. And they could do a lot of different things with them. For example, a medium-sized dinosaur that is really good at fighting, a small one that can run really fast and even sprint over water, another one that can jump really high like he's some sort of living spring, and way more. All of these would be fun to take on as well as capture. And the ideas I mentioned are just the tip of the iceberg. You could come up with so many more ideas. So personally, I think this would be a really cool idea. Number 2. Now, while we have so far talked about a lot of living creatures, Nintendo could also do something else. They could add more robots. And this wouldn't really be anything new, to be honest. We have seen many of them before, and this wouldn't really be anything new, to be honest. For example, magikoopas. These are small mechanical versions of Bowser, resembling a wind-up toy. And they must wind themselves up again from time to time in order to keep moving so they can get you. And another one we have seen is Mega Hammer, a gigantic robot that's used for a boss fight with Bowser Jr. And both these concepts were a lot of fun. So I would love to see a new type of robot in the next Super Mario Odyssey. And when it comes to this, I got one idea that would be really cool, as well as fitting with the whole capture mechanic. Some sort of helicopter robot. Now sure, we have seen Paragoombas before, and those allowed you to fly, but they were limited in ways. And so these new helicopter enemies could give you a lot more freedom when flying around. But it all comes at a cost. When flying around, you can go as high as the game allows you, and anywhere you want really. But when flying, you're using fuel. And at some point, after flying around for a short amount of time, you will run out of juice. And because of that, you will start to crash. And right before it runs out, alarms will go off and red lights will blink all over the helicopter, which creates a bit of stress and also gives the player another warning. So if you're high up in a place where there's no land, then you're screwed and you will probably fall into a pit of sorts. Personally, I think this concept would be really fun and would also add an interesting element to the game. Limitless flying options, but with a lot of risk, because you can run out of fuel and that will lead to a game over. But while I think the idea is really cool, I think the chances of this one ever appearing in a game are very unlikely. Number 1. Now for our last one, I saved the type of enemy I would really like to see in a Super Mario Odyssey type game. Either a sequel or something similar to it. A new type of magikoopa. These koopas can cast spells that can deal damage, change blocks, spawn enemies, and more. And it would be really cool if a new type of this enemy is seen in a sequel, allowing the player to use magic. And one thing they could do with this without making it all too crazy is giving the player a set of elemental powers. Think of stuff like ice balls, fireballs, and an electric attack of sorts. This would already give the player a lot of combat options, but you can do a whole lot more with them, to be honest. You could even build small challenges and puzzles around this. You gotta remember, in a game like Super Mario Odyssey, exploring and messing around is important. And these different elemental powers could be used for that purpose. Here is just one example. You could use the electrical attack to power some sort of device, for example a lift in a building or something. And another thing you could do is create a world with a huge lake, and high up in the sky is a power moon. And so you first need to freeze the lake with your ice balls, and then capture some other enemy in order to jump high enough. A concept like that would be fun, and it would also make this new Magikoopa type great when exploring the world. And of course, Nintendo could easily add some puzzles and challenges based around this enemy. And personally, I really hope they put enemies like the ones mentioned on this list in a future Super Mario title. And of course, a sequel to Super Mario Odyssey would be the best option. And now we've reached the end of this video. Now be sure to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button. All of this really helps, and that way you won't miss any future videos.
What a twist!